MademmyifyASMR True Crime. Welcome back, my Mad Hatters, and welcome to Mademmyify ASMR, and of course, welcome to another True Crime Tuesday. It's finally here, the St. Osyths witch trials, the one that I promised you weeks ago. This one has become a surprise two-parter. I literally spent all week on the script and I was like, this is nearly 6 pages long and I still have about 20 pages to go, so I thought I would split it into two. It might be one long one, one short one. We shall see. Hopefully you enjoy this one. It's kind of a mix of history and ASMR, and I was doing history on my channel for a while, but I kind of let it fall by the wayside. Anyway, before I start, one of those random thoughts I had while I was walking the dog today was it would be kind of cool to do like a true crime collab at some point. I don't know if there's any other true crime ASMR artists that watch this that will be up for that, like do a really big case and split it down into two, maybe a historic case, maybe the Yorkshire Ripper, maybe another witch trial or something. Anyway, just an idea, so feel free to message me in the comments here or on my Instagram if you're a true crime ASMR artist who's interested in something like that, and maybe we can work something out. Anyway, I'm just going to dive straight into the case rather than rambling, which I am already doing. The witch trials at Osyth are unique in a couple ways. It was a pre-James I witch trial, and it was also one that was incredibly well documented in a pamphlet by someone called W.W. I couldn't find their full name, and this pamphlet was entitled A True and Just Record of the Information, Examination and Confession of all the Witches taken at St. Osyth in the county of Essex, whereof some were executed and others were entreated according to the determination of law, wherein all men may see what a pestilent people witches are, and how unworthy to live in a Christian commonwealth. That title just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? I did ask my friend who works with literature about this, and she did confirm that 16th century book titles are very much what it says on the tin. The book is written in very old English, so it can be a bit of a tough read, but there was like a more modern-ish version that was produced, and I used a mix of both when writing this. St. Osyth is located in north-east Essex, about 5 miles from Clacton-on-Sea and 12 miles from the town of Colchester, and apparently it's the driest place in the UK. The village was the focus of an episode of the TV show Time Teen back in 2005, where they hoped to uncover some information about the early origins of the village. The Essex witch trials mostly occurred between 1566 and 1589. The first execution of a witch in England actually took place in Chelmsford. St. Osyths were actually some of the last of the Essex witch trials. Witches were persecuted under the Witchcraft Act of 1563. A witch who was found guilty of killing a person or a second witchcraft offence would be sentenced to hang. Lesser witchcraft offences would be punished by imprisonment or use of a pillory, which is basically a set of stocks, but your head and face are placed inside them, and people come and laugh at you and throw things at you. The St. Osyths witchcraft accusations began on February the 19th, 1582, when Grace Thurlow spoke to her employer, local justice of the peace and witch hunter Brian Darcy, and she accused another woman, Ursula Kemp, of being a witch. Ursula was known locally lie. Grace claimed that around 12 months prior to this accusation, her son Davy had been unwell. Ursula had paid Grace a visit to see how the boy was doing, and she conducted a well-known folk healing ritual to help Davy recover. She took his hand and remarked, "A good child, how art thou loaden?" After saying these words, she got up and left, then came back, said the words again, and left, and then she did this 3 times, and Grace got some comfort from this ritual. And when Ursula left, Grace actually asked if she would return during the night, but Ursula told her, "I warrant the tiny child shall do well enough." The next day, Grace and Ursula saw each other, and Ursula asked how Davy was doing, and Grace told her that he had taken good rest that night and was seemingly on the mend, though she noted that the palms of the child's hands were turned where the backs should be and the backs in place of the palms. I tried to Google to see if I could find any obvious old-timey illness or anything that could explain this. The closest I could find would be either ulnar contraction or Dupuytren contracture, probably mispronouncing that. Grace was actually pregnant at the time of Davy's illness, and Ursula had assumed wrongly that she would be asked to assist Grace with the birth of this child due to the two's friendship, and also Ursula's reputation as someone who would help during labour. But 3 months later, Ursula learned that Grace had arranged for another woman to assist with the birth of her child. Ursula was very insulted by this, and she marched over to the Thurlow house to tell Grace just what she thought of this ingratitude. The 2 women argued, and Grace remarked that she'd recently had a bout of lameness, and she said she'd recently experienced this, and she told Ursula if she continued to suffer from this lameness, she would have no choice but to tell a magistrate that Ursula was the cause of her lameness. Ursula was considered a naughty name. I love that they use the word naughty instead of like witch or evil. It was a common name among witches, but Ursula didn't seem too bothered by this threat. In fact, Ursula, by her own admission, was adept at unwitching those who had been bewitched, but was not capable of bewitching people. In fact, Ursula offered to show Grace how to unwitch herself. All she had to do was send away the other birth attendant. Grace didn't tell Darcy if she did send this birth assistant away or not, but the child, a girl who was named Joan, was delivered without any incident. After the birth of this child, however, the 2 women would fall out again, as Grace did not let Ursula act as a wet nurse, even as Grace continued her work as a maid. Unfortunately, when Joan was barely 3 months old, tragedy would strike. She fell from her cradle and broke her neck, dying instantly. Upon hearing about the baby's death, Ursula was quite cruel, telling people, "It maketh no matter, for she might have suffered me to have the nursing and keeping of it." Basically, she was saying this wouldn't have happened if she'd just let me wet nurse and look after the baby. The 2 women had fallen out at this point, and Grace began again suffering with this lameness. Upon hearing Grace was suffering with lameness, Ursula actually showed up at the Thurlow house and told Grace that she could cure this lameness for 12 pence. Grace was suffering so badly that she agreed, and for the next 5 weeks her physical suffering would be relieved whenever Ursula visited. After 5 weeks, Ursula came to collect her payment. However, Grace told Ursula she had no money and she couldn't pay her. Ursula was like, "You know what, you can't pay me, how about you just give me some cheese instead?" I'd be happy to accept payments in cheese. And Grace told her that she didn't have any cheese so lame that she couldn't get out of bed. Grace was not the only person to actually speak out about Ursula. That same day that Grace spoke to Brian Darcy, Agnes Leatherdale also came forward. Agnes told Darcy that in September Ursula had sent her son to her house to ask for some scouring sand, which is an abrasive cleaner, and Ursula had offered the dyeing of a pair of women's hose, pair of tights, in exchange for this scouring sand, but Agnes, and I quote, knowing her to be a naughty beast, said no and was like, "You're not having any." Ursula accepted this, but then she saw Agnes's daughter delivering some scouring sand to a neighbour and was understandably angry upon seeing this, and she apparently muttered something when she saw this girl. And shortly after, now originally when I wrote this I thought it was the girl that she saw delivering the sand, but I think Agnes had two daughters and one of them was a baby and one of them was an older child, and it was the baby that fell ill. But yeah, this baby became unwell with a great swelling in the bottom of the belly and other privy parts. I couldn't find anything about what this could have been illness-wise. Agnes also told Darcy that on the 10th of February she had approached Ursula, informing her that she had been seeing of a healer to try and discover the cause of this mystery illness her daughter had, and this healer claimed that Ursula Kemp had bewitched the child. It's important to note that accusations from cunning folk, as they were called, or healers, were common, and these healers often knew about local tensions, and essentially these healers would just stir the pot and stir the gossip and the rumour mill, and all witchcraft accusations ever were basically just like local gossips, and women that didn't like each other, and men that wanted rid of their wives in an easy way. Ursula was unimpressed with this accusation and told Agnes she didn't believe that she'd actually been to see anyone. However, Agnes continued to believe in Ursula's guilt, as when she'd taken her daughter to another local healer, Mother Ratcliffe, the child had seemed to point to Ursula's house and was crying as she pointed to the house and saying, "Whoa, whoa," and this was seen as an accusation. Unfortunately, Mother Ratcliffe was unable to help the child, and she was still suffering with this mystery illness when Agnes made the accusation to Justice Darcy. The day after these accusations were made, Ursula was brought in to be questioned by Brian Darcy. Ursula told him that about 10 or 11 years earlier she'd also been struck with lameness, and in order to cure her lameness she'd visited the wife of a man named Cock, who lived in the village of Wheely, which was 5 miles north. There's actually no records of this woman, so it's speculated that either Ursula made her up or perhaps she had died in the period where the records were damaged, but there's also no records of a marriage between Mr. and Mrs. Cock or a birth of anyone who was named Cock. I've said that too many times. This woman told her that to cure her lameness, she would need to mix together hogston and charvel. It's unclear from records if this was bones or a herb, and she would need to hold them in her left hand and to take a knife in the other. Using the knife, she then had to prick this mix of dung and charvel 3 times and then throw it into the fire. After doing this, she should then make 3 pricks under a table before sticking the knife in there. Finally, she should take 3 sage leaves and 3 leaves of St. John's wort and put them in some ale, and this ale was to be drank first thing on a morning and last thing on a night. Providing Ursula followed these instructions, according to this woman, she would get better. Ursula followed these instructions and found that her condition improved, and she decided, you know what, I don't want to keep this knowledge of this cure for lameness to myself, so she decided to use it to help the wives of Page and Gray, who were also suffering with some lameness, and these women also got better. At this point, Justice Darcy was getting annoyed that Ursula had not yet mentioned any of the accusations against her, and told Ursula that if she would just be honest and confess, she would nothing to fear and she would be treated with leniency. Apparently, upon hearing this, Ursula broke down and cried and began to confess. I don't know if Ursula was tortured. I think at this point the law hadn't been passed to make it legal or like that you had to torture out the confession of a witch. If there was any torture involved, it wasn't in any of the records, but it could be, because she did seem to confess very quickly, just from being told, oh, we'll be lenient on you. Anyway, Ursula confessed to Darcy that she had 4 familiars, 2 males and 2 females. The female spirits caused the lameness and would harm anyone she chose. They would harm Catala if she asked, and the male familiars brought death to those Ursula decided to punish. When she was questioned further, she gave descriptions of her helpers. One of the males was a grey cat called Titty. The other male was a black cat called Jack, and the females were a black toad named Piggin and a white lamb named Tiffin. Ursula was then asked which spirits she'd sent to Grace Thurlow and Agnes Leatherdale, and she said that Titty had gone to Grace and Piggin to the child. She also confessed having sent Tiffin to knock over the cradle and kill Grace's baby. After this, apparently unprompted, though later it would transpire that Darcy got his confession using slightly less than honest means, Ursula continued to confess, saying she had also caused the death of her own sister-in-law by sending Jack to torment her to death. After the sister-in-law had called Ursula a witch and a whore, Justice Darcy then sent for Agnes and Grace to be brought in so that they could confront their supposed tormentor. Upon seeing the 2 women, Ursula began to cry, falling to her knees and begging for forgiveness. She then began to accuse other women in the village, starting with Alice Newman, who she claimed had also sent spirits to plague Agnes's child and Grace Thurlow. Importantly, the next day Ursula spoke to Justice Darcy again, and this time she changed her story slightly. She claimed a quarter of a year earlier, Alice had actually come to Ursula's house and the 2 had argued. The cause of this argument is unknown, but during this row, Alice threatened to go to Justice Darcy and report Ursula as a witch. Ursula had not taken this threat seriously, especially since the 2 had actually made friends again that same day. Alice left that day. When Alice left that day, she had not returned home alone. She'd actually taken a pot home from Ursula's house, and in this pot were Ursula's spirits. The 2 continued to remain on good terms, and at Christmas time that year, Ursula told Alice about the falling out that she had with Grace Thurlow. She also asked Alice to send Titty to plague Grace and cause her suffering, which Alice had willingly done. Titty had then returned to Ursula and told her that it had done as requested, and Ursula had rewarded Titty by allowing him to suck some blood before returning to Alice. During the second interview, Ursula also told Darcy about some other disputes she had had with her other neighbours. John Stratton had called her a whore, and his wife had refused to give Ursula some spices. In response to this, Ursula asked Alice to send Jack to John Stratton's wife. The spirit did as it was told and was awarded blood from Ursula's thigh, and was also given some blood from Alice Newman. During the second confession, Ursula had clearly tried to shift responsibility onto Alice, likely hoping accusations against her, including knowing about the spirits allegedly in her possession. Alice made a mistake during this interview. At one point during the questioning, Darcy threatened to remove Alice's spirits if she didn't cooperate. In response to this, Alice replied that this couldn't happen and she'd just keep them with her, before quickly adding, if I had any. But this wasn't enough to undo what she had allegedly just confessed. After this, other villagers came forward to accuse the women. Alice's neighbour William Hook came forward to say that he had heard Alice's husband William Newman blame Alice for his misery, which, you know, I'm sure that's very common. Like, when you've been in a relationship with someone for years, when you're married, sometimes when you have a falling out, you say, it's your fault that I am so miserable. I know, maybe only if you've got a bad marriage or a toxic marriage, but I know, like, it's probably quite common for someone to say, it's your fault I'm miserable to their partner, like when they're not in a great mood. William also said he had overheard a strange conversation between the couple during a mealtime. He had heard this on several occasions. He had heard William say, dost thou see it?" implying something was in the room. Alice would always respond the same way, telling her husband that if he saw anything, he should just give it some meat and it should go away again. Apparently giving it some meat didn't resolve things, as Hook heard William Newman telling Alice to beat the thing away. It's more than likely that the Newmans just had a problem with rats in the house, as that was quite a common issue around that time. Ursula named several more women from around the village: Elizabeth Bennet, Alice Hunt and Agnes Glasscock. According to Ursula, Elizabeth kept a spirit that was in the shape of a ferret in a pot. Why do all these people keep their spirits in a pot? She knew this because she had seen it when she went to ask for some milk. She'd peered through a window and seen this ferrety spirit running about. Elizabeth allegedly had 2 spirits in total, named Suckin and Leard. I think that's pronouncing it right. Apparently Tiffin had told Ursula about these spirits. Tiffin will become quite important later on. Elizabeth had apparently used her spirits to plague the wife of a man named Byatt, and plague this wife to death. She'd also made 3 of Byatt's cattle very ill. 2 died and 1 survived as a fire was lit around it and it tried to escape the heat. She'd also apparently sent her spirits to torment a child and to kill a man whose surname was Willingdale, as well as using them to kill the wife of a man named William Willis. William's wife had suffered for many years before succumbing to her curse. Ursula claimed Alice Hunt also had a ferret-shaped spirit that was kept in a pot, and Ursula had spotted this one as she'd peered through Alice's window. Tiffin had then informed Ursula that Alice Hunt had 6 spirits, and she used these spirits to kill a man named Haywood, and Alice had then rewarded the spirit with her blood, though Tiffin didn't know where the blood was from on Alice's body. A local shoemaker told Ursula that Agnes Glasscock had bewitched his child and had been responsible for the child's death. Agnes had also sent her spirits to torment a child in the care of someone named Paige, and this child had died. This shoemaker, I read, I think it was the same shoemaker, but according to some statements he gave, he had a lot of, if I'm remembering it right, because I didn't put this in my notes, sorry, he had a lot of naughty women that would come in and out of his house. I don't know if that means prostitutes or if they mean naughty women as in witches. But yeah, Ursula concluded her confession with more incrimination of Alice Newman. She told Justice Darcy that Alice had gone to visit a man named Johnson, whose job it was to collect and distribute money to the poor. She had asked him for 12 pence to help her sick husband, but Johnson told her he couldn't help her as he'd already given out more money than he had collected. Alice was angry and the two argued. based on this, several women were arrested and brought in for questioning. I mean, imagine that now. And if you like went to the police and like, well, I don't know this person murdered someone, but like my spirit guide does, and police taking it seriously. Agnes was brought in first and she was really not happy. She denied the accusations against her and her body was searched for any signs of a witch's mark. Spots were found on her thigh and left shoulder, and this was seen as proof these were places where her spirits had drank her blood. In spite of these marks, Agnes continued to deny the charges, so Darcy decided to get Agnes and Ursula in the same room together. Upon Ursula making these accusations to Agnes's face, Agnes flew into a rage. She called Ursula a whore and she threatened to scratch her like the witch that she was. It was actually a belief back then that witches couldn't bleed due to the devil and their familiars taking their blood, and so if you scratched a witch she wouldn't bleed, and this would prove that they were a witch. Agnes claimed, contrary to being a witch, she was in fact herself bewitched, and that Ursula was the one bewitching her, and that she couldn't cry, and this was proof that she was bewitched. However, historically it was usually witches who couldn't cry, so this statement probably didn't help her case. Alice Hunt also denied the accusations against her. She claimed she had not fallen out with Hayward and had not harmed his cattle and didn't keep spirits in a pot. A pot was brought in before her and she was asked if this was her pot that she used to feed her spirits, and she said, "Nah, not even my pot, mate." But she was still arrested. After her arrest, she asked to speak to Justice Darcy alone, and to him she fell to her knees and confessed tearfully that she had two spirits that had visited her as little as 6 days ago. They were named Jack and Robin, and they took the form of two small horses, one black horse and one white horse. Jack and Robin had also told Alice that Ursula was going to betray her. Alice went on to name her sister Marjorie Samuth as a witch and claimed that her sister had two spirits named Tom and Robin who took the form of toads, and that she had received these spirits from their mother, Mother Barnes, who was also a witch, and I believe she was known to be a witch, and she had actually died less than 2 weeks ago. Marjorie was questioned and admitted it was true. She did have two spirits. Marjorie also implicated another woman in the village, Joan Pesci, a widow. Apparently her mother had told her that if she did not want these spirits that she'd given her, she could just send them to Joan. She claimed she'd sent them to Joan after she learned of Ursula's arrest, and that was the last time she'd seen her spirits. Alice Hunt also accused Joan. She was actually her next door neighbour, and claimed she'd heard Joan speaking to someone when there was no one in the house, so she must have been speaking to imps or her spirits. Alice's mother had also informed her Joan was skilled at witchcraft. It was said that Joan had the power to know everything that took place in St. Osyths, and that she used this to her advantage. I mean, it just sounds like this Joan is just a local gossip. Unsurprisingly, Joan Pesci was taken in for questioning, and she denied everything, including the accusation that she knew about everything that happened in St. Osyths. She was asked about the death of Johnson, the ball collector, and she agreed it had been unexpected, but she also said that she had heard Alice Newman had bewitched him. Elizabeth Bennet was also asked about Johnson's death, but she actually refused to name Alice as being responsible. So, not everyone threw everyone under the bus. And that is, I'm afraid, all I have for you today. I cut it off quite abruptly there. It might have been because I was writing it quite late in the day. I hope you will be back next week for part 2 of the St. Osyths witch trials. I hope you've enjoyed what you've heard heard so far and that I've educated and informed you even just a little bit. As always, good night